Breadbox Media programming is brought to you by Jack Kane Ford. Find your next Ford Tough vehicle at caneford.com. Woodhill Community Center. Have a hand in the heart of the city. Support their mission with your donations at woodhillcommunitycenter.org. Toyota on Nicholasville Superstore. Online consultants are standing by right now to help you find your next Toyota. Visit toyotaonnicholasville.com. Lexus of Lexington, home of the best-selling Lexus IS. Find yours today at lexusoflexington.com.
Well, hey, everybody, and welcome to today's episode of Lisa, Hendey, and Friends. I have a great guest joining me today, but before we dive into that conversation, I want to thank you for your patience with my schedule over the last couple of weeks when I had the great joy of visiting the UK and being in both Scotland and London, England for about 2 weeks with my son, Adam, who's going over to graduate school over there. While in the very beautiful but gloomy weather of the UK, I came down with some form of the plague, I think. So if my voice sounds a little huskier than usual today, bear with me. Lots of good times were had. And if you're my friend on Facebook or follow me on Instagram, I hope you'll head over and check out some of the pictures that I shared of lots of great places across the UK. So for today's episode, I'm really thrilled to welcome someone who I have actually known. I told him we've been in each other's sphere of influence for quite a long time, but we're actually chatting for the very first time in person today. Our guest is John Abbate, and John is an independent franchisee, owner-operator of numerous McDonald's restaurants throughout the Central Valley of California, and he is a strategic advisor to a wonderful organization you may be familiar with, Dynamic Catholic Institute. John is the co-founder and the president of Possibility Productions, and we have him on today to discuss this wonderful new book that he's got out, Invest Yourself, Daring to be Catholic in Today's Business World. Welcome, John Abbate, to Lisa, Hendey, and Friends.
Lisa, it's great to be here and great to be talking to you. Really, I'm privileged, so it's going to be a fun time.
Gosh, I have so many questions, but one of the things that is especially significant to me is that while you and I have kind of known each other peripherally for many years, I looked it up in my email today, and it was first your beautiful wife, Karen, who I met in person. And do you know that that was actually all the way back in 2012? So that's how long I've been knowing your family.
Wow, that is a while. And Karen is a huge fan of your work, and it's just really wonderful to have my wife, Karen, a part of this process, and knowing you and always searching and being part of a deeper need to gather her faith and to share her faith with not only myself, but our family and others. So, and she's a huge fan of you and all the work that you've done over the last 10 years or so.
So it's super awesome to get to know the rest of the family now. And I just want to say congratulations. I was lucky enough to have a sneak peek at Invest Yourself, which is your beautiful new book from Dynamic Catholic. And one of the great blessings of being me is that I often get, like I said, sneak peeks at these kind of books. And this one, when it came across my desk, despite the fact that I sort of knew of you, I was particularly interested in this because I think that some of the topics that you strike on here are really relevant for anybody, regardless of their vocation. So I want to say to our listeners right up front that if you heard John's bio and you think, oh, this is a businessy kind of thing, I want you to stay tuned because we're going to be talking a lot today about generosity of spirit and leadership and how each of us is called to just really change the world around us. John, we gave your formal bio, but how do you introduce yourself to people for the first time?
Typically, I introduce myself as a businessman, McDonald's owner-operator, but I'm also involved in a lot of other things, including nonprofits such as Possibilities Production, being involved as a strategic advisor to Dynamic Catholic. I wear a fair amount of hats, and it gives me an opportunity not only to speak and talk about my faith, but also to be a business owner and to be out in the community and be working on things that affect the Valley, things that affect the McDonald's brand, and things that affect the greater Catholic world through Dynamic Catholic.
So this book has been a little while in the coming, because you've been involved with Matthew Kelly and with things at Dynamic Catholic for several years now. So what motivated the act of carving time out of what I'm sure is an extremely busy schedule to sit down and write the book?
Yeah, I think the book's been coming for over a decade. I actually got involved with Matthew Kelly at Dynamic Catholic probably, almost 18 years ago. And so his work and himself personally have been very impactful on my life for sure. And not only my life, obviously, but my family's and many others. So I've always respected the way he writes a book and his ability to connect to the greater Catholic culture in a way that is not overbearing, but is just really beautiful in its simplicity. And I think that's really what's needed today in the Catholic world when we're talking about evangelization. But as I went through, my process, and I ended up getting a master's in theology, and I finished this. It was probably a 4.5-year ordeal, and I finished that a couple of years ago. And then I felt like I really had the background and the strength to take all these thoughts in my head and actually put them down in a book format. And so I started working on this book almost 3 years ago. And of course, as you know, Lisa, when you think you're done with the book and you turn it into the publisher, you realize it's just begun. And so that actually happened almost 1.5 years ago. So it's been a long time coming. And writing a book is truly about perseverance and patience, as you well know. And so it's funny for it actually to finally be here. I thought it would be out 1 year ago. But that was a bit naive, obviously.
You're used to running your business, and running a business actually where timeliness is a little different than the book publishing process. It's interesting. Really it's really interesting with writing, like with books, that, I think there's about as much time in kind of post-production. So you spend your time writing, and then you have all this time, little shorter than, it used to be, but still quite a long process. So how do you describe the book to people, Invest Yourself? I mean, a lot of people will look at it and think it has the look and feel of a business book, and yet there's so much more to what you've created here.
Right. And I think the title in and of itself gives a little indication. So it's Invest Yourself, and some people will immediately think it means invest in yourself. But the reality is that the book is about not investing in yourself so much as investing yourself into other people's lives and being a self-gift, a contributor to the world. And I think that's kind of the spin on it. And it's, I use my background, because I have such a strong background in business, as kind of a backdrop. And then I use some of my life experiences as a backdrop. And I weave in Catholic theology as part of the process. But it's not truly a business book, though I use some concepts, I think, that I steal from the business world to help me kind of explain. And I think part of that is because our Catholic faith is just so beautiful in its practicality and the way it allows us to live our life. And so, I think the business world is a very practical world. And it's interesting to see how the Catholic Church and some of the norms of our Catholic faith over the course of time are just so tried and true and so practical. And it reminds me in some ways of business concepts like compounding interest and just, investing and being methodical and patient and getting outside of yourself to help other people. Because that works in the business world and is what we talk about all day long in the Catholic world. It's about investing yourself, to be that self-gift that truly is our calling, And so it's a bit of a play on the business world, and I think in a fun way,
I think it really is. And one thing that's really strikes me that makes it quite different from a lot of kind of business books that I've read recently is that, your own spiritual journey forms a huge foundation of what you're trying to do and invest yourself. And so how was it for you kind of as somebody who is a business leader and someone who is, used to kind of running your operation and all that, to get into the more personal side of your own faith journey and where that's taken you in terms of both your family life and your career life?
Yeah. Well, anytime you put yourself out there and you're really honest about who you are and where you've been, it's scary. It's scary. Sometimes it's scary to be Catholic today and to be proclaiming your Catholic faith in a public square. That's a scary endeavor. But then when you're out there and you're just putting yourself out there and being real about who you are and where you've come, I was a little apprehensive, but then I come back to, St. John Paul and, what did he tell us? Be not afraid. And that was really on the eve of his papacy, it was about, let's be not afraid to live our faith. Let's be not afraid to be the human being God calls us to be. And so I always hearken back to that, that beautiful concept of be not afraid. And I pray on it. And through that process, I've had the courage and now the platform to be not afraid to live my faith in culture and be not afraid to share my story. Because the reality is that my story is everybody's story. There's bits and pieces of my story and my wife's story and my family's story that comes through in this book that is truly something that's universal. Because life is difficult and we all struggle with so many of the same things. And I talk about this. I talk about, the understanding that we're in this world, we have to make money and we have to supply food for our families, and we want to, fund the 401k, and we want to be successful, and we want to have, honor, and we want to have material things. We want to have all these things that make us human, but we live in a world that is temporal, and we live in a world that is governed by the laws of supply and demand. There's not enough for everybody. And so often we fall into this scarcity mentality, and we live our life through what I call our biological anthropology that is all about scarcity, all about supply and demand. But the message from Jesus Christ is all about abundance. It's about getting outside of yourself and understanding that this isn't a temporal. We're not temporal human beings. We live in a world today that's temporal, but we have this vision, this beatific vision that is truly our higher calling. And so how do we take those two concepts, this biological anthropology, and we play it against this understanding of what our true calling is, which is our Christian anthropology that's all about abundance and self-gift, and allowing that to be the dominant force in our life as opposed to all these other things that drive us that are so much a part of who we are, from our biological anthropology that focuses on wealth, pleasure, power, honor, all the substitutes for God. And so I really try to really bring that out in the book and talk about my own struggles as a business owner, and how to come to terms with this understanding that what I really want is to live a life that is uncommon, that is my Christian anthropology, that is a life of investing in others, not so much worrying about myself. And so that's kind of the backdrop of the book.
I think, John, that's where we make the transition from something that people might look at the word invest and think, oh, it's a business book, it's for business people. And what you just described is, to me, what underscores the fact that this is a book for really anyone at any point of life, especially if you're early in your life. I hope you'll pick this up and read it, because I think you could save yourself a lot of challenges if you learn some lessons early on from John. John, you're raised in a faith-oriented family, and you're raising a family yourself in the faith. But was there a kind of a point in your own life where you realized your faith was something that you were claiming for yourself, as opposed to something that had been passed along to you by your parents?
Yeah, I've always again, I was a cradle Catholic, and I've always been proud to be part of this great Catholic Church. And I've been, consistent in my faith really for most of my life. It's been a big part of who I am. But trying to live your life and your faith on Sundays is one thing, but actually taking that faith into the workplace or wherever you happen to be Monday through Friday is a whole different level of commitment. And I think I'm by nature a very type A person, very competitive. And, I say in the book, I hate losing more than I like winning. And these type of people, we struggle sometimes with ability and taking a step back and understanding that it's not all about us and it's about what we can do to add value to the greater culture. And I think that's where I struggled, not so much with ever doubting my faith, but understanding how I can take that faith and commit to it personally, how I can then take all this God-given talent, and instead of focusing this talent on what it's going to give me materially, individually, I can take this talent and see how it can manifest itself in the culture in a greater way. And I think that's been the switch. And that happens sometimes through pain and through suffering. And I've had some of that in my life, and I talk about that. And I think that was part of the journey of realizing that happiness, certainly the happiness that I seek and the happiness that we all seek, is not coming through, wealth, honor, pleasure. It comes through this deeper relationship with God that is really the abundance that we seek. And so I would say it probably took me into my mid to late 30s to figure that out. And then it's been quite a ride since then.
So one aspect of your daily business life is the fact that you have the ability to have an impact on the lives of others, and not being specifically not only the customers that you serve, but the people that work with you as well. So how has your work on the book and how has this idea of invest yourself kind of trickled down into your role as business owner and manager and a kind of a day-to-day dealing with the people that you oversee in your corporate operations?
Yeah. Thank you for that question. It's a great question because it's a struggle. And the reason it's a struggle is that I employ anywhere up to 2,000 people, and I have, this huge organization of employees and thousands and thousands and thousands of customers. And I found that the biggest challenge in my job is communicating the vision that I seek for the organization and all the people who work with me in this organization. Not only in support of the McDonald's brand and how we want to represent ourselves, but how we want to represent ourselves as human beings. And so I would say I've really changed how I approach my work over the last decade, in that it's not so much about doing tasks and doing things, it's about communicating my vision for how we want to live our lives and culture that we want to create in our organization that's all about contribution, self-gift, and legacy. And so, I'm always communicating these messages. And the interesting thing about our Catholic faith is these messages are so universal. If I have somebody who works for me that is Catholic or Protestant or in some cases Muslim, I can communicate these foundational messages of our faith, and I don't have to scream. They're Catholic messages. They're beautiful messages on behalf of the common good. And so I've done a lot of that over the last decade or so, and because ultimately for me to impact the entire organization, all 2,000 people, it can't just be me. It has to be a bunch of folks who believe in what I believe in and are willing to take that into their restaurant each and every day and to listen and care and sometimes play in the gray. It's easy, really in business, it's really easy to be black or white. It's really easy to be a soft leader, and it's really easy to be just a really hard-nosed black and white leader. But when you're trying to live in the gray, the amount of work and the ambiguity is is really, really difficult. And that's why it takes a true commitment to what you're trying to accomplish as an organization and a culture. And so we do this in a myriad of different ways, but it starts with me, and it starts with me being able to communicate this message to my top leaders. And then for them to believe in it and be treated that way, and then for them to actually go out into the marketplace, into their restaurants, and look at these folks differently. Look at these folks as beautiful children of God, and how can I help them be better tomorrow than they are today? And once we start thinking that way, then there's so many opportunities to affect lives in our organization, whether it's through college scholarships for folks that are, going to school, whether it's through just helping people get more hours because they're trying to feed their family, whether it's through being reasonable with people's schedules so they can be a wonderful mom and work at McDonald's, or for young people to counsel them on what do you really want to do with your life and how can we help you get there. I do these, what we call these future leaders groups, and I bring in these young people into the organization, and I talk to them about the future, not only about their future with McDonald's if they so choose, but what do you really want? How can we help you? How can McDonald's be the bridge that allows you to become the doctor or the lawyer or the dentist or the school teacher or whatever you want to be? How can we be there for you? And that takes, that takes a bit of courage and kind of long-term thinking, because we always want good people, but if those good people are better served in God's kingdom someplace else, then so be it. What can we do to help them get there? And so that's the message that I'm constantly preaching to my supervisors and my general managers. And then I have to count on those folks to actually take that message and live it in the marketplace. And so that's a challenge, because I'll go into one of my restaurants sometime and I'll just not feel the energy, and I'll see that this isn't the environment that I want to project. And I have to be humble and patient and understand that let's go back and see where we're missing. What am I doing that's not resonating in this particular restaurant? What's the supervisor doing? What's the GM doing? How do we gather ourselves and be better? Because this whole notion of McDonald's as a dead-end job, and this notion that service industry is just really slave labor or something like that is just so far from the truth. And that's part of the message I want to get out there, is that we have so many beautiful young people and older people working for us, and they're a huge part of our culture and a huge part of our economy. And the more we can lift these folks up, whether it's within the McDonald's world or someplace else, the better we're all going to be. And that's part of getting outside of ourselves and investing in others.
I love that. And you use this phrase a couple times, living in the gray. And when we're talking about investing ourselves and leaving a legacy, I can't help but see this book through the prism of a mom of young adults and now a mother-in-law too. And how a lot of what you talk about in terms of the kind of self-giving that you advise on the book really relates so beautifully to family life. And I know that you're a dad. So how has the process of writing the book and thinking through this part of your life in this way impacted on your parenting and your relationship as a parent with Karin as well?
Yeah, that has been, I'll tell you, one of the things, and you know this, Lisa, one of the things about speaking and writing and doing it frequently is that you have to hold yourself accountable to a higher standard, because nobody wants to be a hypocrite, right? And so, one of the ways that has helped me to be a better human being is by committing myself in a way publicly to living and believing a certain way. And by doing that, I have to be constantly cognizant of how I'm living my life and what I'm trying to accomplish as a husband, as a father, as a son, as a brother, right? And so it also helps my wife, and she comes back and she helps hold me accountable and says, John, you're trying to do too many things. Remember what you talk about. Remember the importance of family first. You preach that all the time, and we have to make sure that we're living that as family first. And so these are great anchoring points for me to come back and realize that happiness is about it's about purpose, and it's about understanding how important family is and doing some of the things that we're meant to as Catholics in this world. So it's interesting. My son, who just left for college this last year, he's at Oklahoma State. And he read the book, and it was interesting to have your son read the book. And I was certainly apprehensive because, I value his opinion, and I hope that what I've done in my life resonates with him, and that and he feels good about what I'm talking about. And so his affirmation is really really positive for me. I really got a kick out of it.
That's awesome. And they usually don't pull any punches. If they feel the other way, we'll let you know too.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this, just because I know how busy you are and how many hats you wear, I'm curious about this idea of work-life balance, and specifically your prayer life, and how what are some of the ingredients that go into your personal prayer life that help you to fuel yourself for the work that you do every day?
Yeah. One of the things that I started doing years and years and years ago was getting up really early and committing myself to a daily regimen of exercise. But one of the things that has done is that not only is it gets me up and it gets me focused, it also allows me time to be prayerful and to be quiet and to take the time to not only fuel my body but my mind as well. And so I love to run. I've been a fairly big runner most of my life, and when I have a chance to go for a long run and to allow it's almost a separation between my body and my mind in a really spiritual way, those are beautiful times for me. And in the mornings, I use that time. Part of it's exercise, but part of it's just quiet time to fuel myself. And it's funny, I say to my wife, hey, as long as I can get my hour of exercise in every day, I'm good. The rest of my life is for other people, and I kind of joke about that. But if I can get that time in the morning that centers me through prayer and exercise, it allows me to be a much better self-gift for others throughout the day. If I don't get that done, I can feel myself being a little edgy, and then worrying about where I'm going to have my quiet time sometime in the later day. And as we all know, sometimes that happens, sometimes it doesn't, because life is so dynamic.
Yeah, so, first fruits happen for a reason, I think. So one thing that you and I have in common is a great love for Our Lady, and we're also both alums of Our Lady's University, the University of Notre Dame, because I saw your master's in business is from Mendoza, which is awesome, at the University of Notre Dame. So along with your devotion to our Blessed Mother, are there any saints that you have a particular devotion to in your life?
Yeah, absolutely. I love St. Jose Maria Escriva and his theology of work. It had a profound impact on my life. And in fact, I think I read about this in the book, but Scott Hahn wrote a book called Ordinary Work, Extraordinary Grace. And that book has been absolutely pivotal in my life. I can't tell you how impactful Scott Hahn's work, and specifically that book, but some others, have had on my life. And I fall back into reading that book from time to time because it's all about how to live your vocation. And we all have a vocation, and how we live that vocation in a truly meaningful way through our work. And sometimes, that work is as a mother, as a father. Sometimes it's as an employer or an employee. But there's this theology that St. Jose Maria talks about that Scott Hahn picked up on that has just been a really powerful presence in my life. And when I find myself getting a bit astray, I fall back on this understanding of vocation and what vocation means for a Catholic. And I try to get recentered on, we have to bring the intrinsic meaning to the job. And I talk about this so often. We have jobs that aren't necessarily intrinsically meaningful. I'm not a brain surgeon, or I'm not a third-grade teacher, I'm not a nurse, I'm not a policeman or a fireman. Where the work itself is intrinsically meaningful, it's impacting lives. I'm a McDonald's owner-operator, and I'm not discounting that, but I have to bring the intrinsic meaning to that job through my attitudes and the way I act, in the way I interact with folks. And so, and that's the beautiful work of St. Jose Maria Escriva and this theology of work.
I love that, and I love that you mentioned it. And I'll share with you that I'm an early riser too, and in my recent months, I'm for the first time reading The Way, which has been very meaningful to me. I'm taking it quite slowly. I'm reading it at a snail's pace because I'm really trying to. It's interesting how even in very brief snippets, he can create such important thought processes in our mind. So I love that you mentioned St. Jose Maria. Folks, we'll have a link in our show notes to a couple of the resources that John has mentioned today. Our guest, again, has been John Abbate, and John is the author of this amazing book from Dynamic Catholic, Invest Yourself, Daring to be Catholic in Today's Business World. I do want to encourage anybody out there that listens to my show that isn't Catholic that, as John's mentioned multiple times during the course of his conversation today, that so many of the precepts in this book are really towards creating a world in which we do have the possibility to change lives around us, even in our very small corners of the world. And so I want to encourage you, regardless of your station in life or whether or not you're outside working for a paycheck every day or working in your home, that there's a lot in here that's really relevant to anybody in their own striving to just make our world a better place. John, what's the best way for folks to kind of follow the work that you do, and maybe to invite you if they wanted to have you out to give a talk or to connect with you more deeply in another way?
Yeah, so I am not a big presence on social media, to be quite honest. I kind of fast from social media. However, that being said, if you go to Dynamic Catholic, there is a webpage devoted to me, and it's just, you type in, John Abbate Catholic or go to Dynamic Catholic, there is a webpage there, and there is a request if you would like to hear me speak, or you can send me an email as well, and I believe the email is on there, and the email is also in the back of the book, but it's john.abbate@dynamiccatholic.com, and that's in the back of the book, but it's also through Dynamic Catholic. So again, their website is the way you access and request for me to come out and speak. And so I truly enjoy speaking to groups all throughout the country, and it's one of the ways that really stimulates me and helps me get my message out, but more importantly, helps me, I think, be a better human being, is when I interact with folks throughout the country who are trying to live their faith and culture.
Well, I hope I get a chance to hear you speak soon, and to get my book signed too. So hopefully you'll be down in LA sometime soon for that.
Yeah.
And for Possibility Productions, which is possibilityproductions.org, can you give us a little overview of some of the good stuff that you have coming up in the near future?
Yes. Possibilityproductions.org is a nonprofit that a really great friend of mine, Brian Kravick, and I started recently, maybe a couple of years ago. And the real genesis of this is to really create opportunities for evangelization, not only in our own parishes, but parishes throughout California. And so that we've really focused on bringing in retreats for men, retreats for women, opportunities to bring in, Christian singers and folks who are just have a message that is pertinent to our lives, to bring them into parishes or bring them into communities and have them inspire people to be better tomorrow than they are today. And possibilitiesproductions.org has, we have lots of things coming up here in the next year or so. And all you have to do is go to possibilitiesproductions.org, and you can click on our site, and it has a delineation of all the great retreats and conferences that are coming up. And so we're really excited about this particular apostolate, and looking forward to the great work we can do in partnership with so many other folks out there who are trying to live their faith in culture. And so that's been a wonderful endeavor too. And working with Brian, as you know, is a beautiful thing, because nobody cares more about the faith and is willing to work harder than him.
Yeah, Brian is on fire. That is for sure. He's an amazing guy. Well, John, thank you so much for the time today. I know that you're a busy guy, so I want to thank you for taking time early in your week to come on. Are there any kind of closing words that you have for everybody out there who's been listening today to your thoughts on Invest Yourself?
Yeah, I just thank you for the opportunity, and thank you for living your faith. And this book isn't necessarily about business, and so if you're not in the business world, but you care about vocation and you care about living your faith and culture, I'd encourage you to pick up the book and give it a whirl, and see how it might add value to your life. I know sometimes people can say, invest yourself, and it's a business book and it's only for certain folks, and I would tell you that it's not. It's a fairly engaging read, I think, with a lot of kind of personal stories that help keep it interesting. And so, anyhow, if you'd like to get a hold of me, please, I'd love to hear from you at john.abbate@dynamiccatholic.com.
Well, folks, definitely in my little blurb of the book, I said whether you're the CEO of a Fortune 500 company or your domain is a suburban minivan, prepare to embrace all that God has in store for your life by reading this book. And I mean it. When you read it, prepare to fasten your seatbelt and to see your life changed, but more importantly, the lives of those around you changed when you truly, truly commit to the precepts that John Abbate is sharing and Invest Yourself. We'll definitely have links in our show notes at lisahendey.com or wherever you listen to this show for you to go ahead and grab the book and easily get in touch with John to bring him out to speak to your organization. And I do want to definitely encourage you to share your feedback on this as well. If you've heard something today that you have a question about, or you want to connect with me on a deeper level, you can always, unlike John, I unfortunately don't get to fast from social media, so you can find me at Lisa Hendey, or definitely over at the website at lisahendey.com. But really, anywhere that you are on social media, reach out, drop me a message. You can always just use the voice feedback, the little voice recorder on your iPhone, and send along a voice memo if that's what you want to do to share your feedback on the show. We'll be back to our regular schedule now that I'm hoping to be in the country for at least a few months now before leaving again. And so that means lots of great interviews coming up, and definitely ways for you to connect with your faith and meet new friends like my friend John Abbate. John, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Absolutely. It's been a pleasure.
And to you, everybody out there, all my friends that are listening, thank you for your time, and especially for the privilege of your friendship. Let's pray for each other this week and all that's ahead of us, and let's make the decision today to invest ourselves so that we can impact the world around us and change it for the better. God bless you, and I'll talk to you next time on Lisa Hendey and Friends.
Breadbox Media Programming is brought to you by...
We want to help others, especially in places of strife, such as the Holy Land, where Christianity is dwindling by the day. But how to help? Here's an easy way: buying products through the Holy Land gift shop. Every product you purchase at myfranciscan.org/shop helps Christians support their families and stay in the Holy Land. Olive wood, embroidery, spices, and many more authentic products from the Holy Land are available right now at myfranciscan.org/shop. The Holy Land Gift Shop, bringing the Holy Land home.
I learned how many people we could help and how good you feel after you've helped others. I know Lent is about giving, so I want to give.
These kids are talking about CRS Rice Bowl, a Lenten program known by generations of Catholic families. Children love it because they experience different cultures and gain a lasting impression of the people they are helping. You can bring CRS Rice Bowl into your home and experience the joy of seeing your children or grandchildren find new meaning in Lent. Visit crsricebowl.org to get started.
Rice Bowl inspired me to pray more and to pray for those who are less fortunate.
The Cincinnati Catholic Men's Conference is back. Tickets are on sale now for Saturday, April 28th at the Taft Theater at cincinnatimen'sconference.com or call 513-214-1534. The speaker conference roster is being hailed as one of the best lineups in the country. In rare appearances, come see Father Mitch Pacwa from EWTN, the man motivator Father Larry Richards, former Moeller High School and University of Notre Dame head football coach Jerry Faust, and the big celebrity keynote, Baz Rutten, UFC world champion, MMA world champ, and movie star. The conference theme is What It Means to Be a True Christian Man in Today's Society. Don't miss the incredible day of motivation, spiritual benefit, and fellowship with men from all walks of life. Get tickets now at cincinnatimen'sconference.com or call 513-214-1534. That's cincinnatimen'sconference.com or 513-214-1534. Thank you for listening to Breadbox Media. Find more about us at breadboxmedia.com.